the data really has turned south in the last couple of months, and we finally found ourselves in a position where everyone's saying the same thing. Rates need to be cut by the end of the year. That's good news for people listening to this, but also businesses out there who have done it tough.
Welcome to Checks and Balances, brought to you by Partners Life. I'm Michael Vincent. This is James Blair. And today we've got Jarrod Kerr, Chief Economist from Kiwibank, back in the building to talk about the inflation number update.
Jarrod, Chief Economist from Kiwibank, welcome back to the podcast.
Thanks for having me back.
It's so we are filming this on the day that the CPI number has come out. You're a very busy man. Thank you for finding us time. What is life like as a chief economist for a bank on the day the inflation number comes out?
Oh, it's busy. It's really busy. Like, you're getting yourself ready for the report itself. Like, you've got to get through all that data in a very short space of time, write it up in a way that's interesting and people are willing to read it. And then dealing with the traders on the trading floor, clients who have questions, media, which is always a fun part of the gig. I was on RNZ news lunchtime, so it's a hectic day.
Yeah.
Now, Mike, I want to before we talk, I'm keen to do this in terms of what we thought was going to happen before the announcement, what we're thinking afterwards. But Mike, can you take us back to the last time we had Jarrod on the podcast? So tell us a little bit about what was happening. There was chief economists out there predicting that.
Yeah, I think it was ANZ said that it was gonna that there was another rate rise or that inflation. I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what it was, but there was definitely a little bit of more of a mix in terms of what the people were predicting was going to happen.
Real uncertainty.
Yeah, but I think that's probably a little bit more natural at that time because we were early on in the process. The data was a lot more all over the place in terms of what we had. But this one, how good.
Yeah, and you were quite stern at that point. And I remember we left that discussion 3 months ago feeling a lot better about life, right? We were like, Jarrod's telling us it's going to be okay, that towards the back end of the year, it'll be paying most of the year.
Yeah.
Then things will get a little bit better. And opposed to sometimes when you talk to economists in 3 months, things can change a lot. More or less, we're singing from the same hymn sheet.
Yeah, which is lucky for me because I then left that meeting and based all of my recommendations for customers basically on that. And I owed a lot of people a lot of bottles of wine if I got it wrong. Yeah.
Okay, so as a reminder, inflation was at 7% at its peak. We're now, as of this morning, we were sitting at 4%. The news has come out at 3.3% today. Before today's announcement came out, what were you expecting was going to happen?
So we thought that inflation would fall, as it did, to 3.4%. It came in at 3.3%, so that's great. Beneath the surface, things are still a little awkward, to put it politely, but we are moving in the right direction, and we are more convinced today that the Reserve Bank has done enough to get inflation back to 2%. So it's good news. And with that, our call for a rate cut in November has gone from being quite an outlier of a call to consensus, which is great because when you're talking to your customers and when you're talking to households in general, but also businesses, having the ability to say to them, look, interest rates are going to be down by the end of this year, and when you wake up this time next year, we're going to be in a much better position than where we are today. And I think it's important to try and lift people's heads because we are going through a very tough time.
Yeah. We were saying just before we started filming, I'm very excited about the number today, not just because obviously we give advice on these things and they are dependent how accurate our advice is. It's very difficult to predict over the short term. Obviously, the longer things are, the easier it is to predict. But just to give some people a sense of relief that there is light at the end of the tunnel and we can see some of that light and, we're not in this forever, and just some sentiment, almost kind of emotional or relief, just that, okay, yeah, there's a way out of this. We're not going to be stuck on this for the next 10 years and you have to sell the house.
Jarrod, I'd be keen to hear, like, along those sort of lines, when you're out doing presentations, talking to the public, we have our kind of the sentiment we're getting, but what are you hearing when you're talking to people about how Kiwis are feeling at the moment?
I'm hearing quite downbeat assessments of people's own businesses and how they see things playing out in the near term. To your point, and I get quite, I guess, excited responses when I come back and say, you know what, my opening line's basically 2025 is going to be better than 24, 26 better than 25. Lift your heads. Let's look through this short-term pain. And I get people coming up to me afterwards saying, that's great, and then they'll list all the issues that they're going through right here, right now, and there are a lot. There's a lot for businesses and households to take on at the moment, but just knowing that things are turning, I think, is helpful.
Yeah, that in the report that you've put out, that hold tight till 25, that line has been just ringing in my ear, because that's very much what been pretty consistent across the year, going, this year's just gonna suck. Yeah. And you just got to make the most of it, focus on the things within your control. But in terms of getting an uplift from the economy, it's just going to be tight. And that whole tight line, I really, really like that. And I think a lot of people can resonate with it. But I would also say there's probably, because we think so short term about, we think good times are going to last forever, we think bad times are going to last forever, we can't see it changing. I don't know if everybody actually expects 2025 to be that much better.
No, I think you're right. That survive till 25 came from one of the clients who was at a presentation, and I've since heard it a few times. So that's why we put it in as the title of our economic outlook, because that's what businesses are telling us. It's tough now. We've just got to ride it out until rates are slashed next year. So that is the mentality. But the shrewd, I guess, investors, the ones who have a bit of cash, I guess, in their back pocket, should be looking for opportunities now.
Yeah, we've been pretty clear with our customers over the last 6 months, especially that, and a much more definite kind of piece of advice we're giving now is, if you have capital to deploy, now is the time to do it. And we're not doing that off the back of, don't expect 20% returns per year or anything like that, but everything's on sale. If you can do it and you can afford it, now's probably the time to go do it.
Yeah. I was even talking to a couple yesterday, and they were like, we have this investment property, we're going to sell it because the cash flows are just horrendous and we want to go travel, live our best life, blah, blah, blah. And I said to them,
you said, no, you're not going anywhere.
Yeah. I was like,
in Hamilton.
I did say, they're like, we want to do a plan. And I was like, if the outcome from this watch is that you want me to say, sell your property and go travel, I would just think about it before you commit to a financial plan.
Yeah.
But the lens I'm trying to get clients to think about things is going, if interest rates were 1 to 1.5% lower and house prices were 10% higher, would you make a different decision? Because if the answer is you would make a different decision, you're being far too short-sighted with your decision making.
Yeah, and well, you've just almost outlined our forecasts, basically. So we are saying that, the cash rate will be down, at least 150 basis points, possibly more. That would then lead to mortgage rates being down by a similar amount. So you go from high 6s into the low 5s pretty quickly. And with that, there's a lot of things going on in the housing market, but clearly a fall in interest rates is a big deal.
Yep.
There is a massive shortage out there with this migration boom. Investors have been sidelined for years. We think investors come back next year. So our forecast is for 5 to 7% gain in house prices next year, which, it's not shooting the lights out, but it's certainly not bad after the correction we've had.
Yeah. I mean, what does it do? Like with interest rates, say, an interest rate drops 1.5% over an 18-month period or whatever it might be. On a $1 million mortgage, that's $15,000 less a year you're paying in interest. For an economy, like that is a lot of cash per household. What does that do to an economy?
Well, it depends on your starting point and all that sort of stuff. But, going from 5.5 to 3, so that bringing your mortgage rates down by that same sort of amount is a lot, right? And don't forget where we've come from. It was in 2021, people made decisions on a 2.1% interest rate. So they've gone from a tripling in their interest rates to coming back to something probably a little bit more normal in the fives. So it won't hurt us anywhere near as much.
Okay, so Jarrod, there's good news with inflation coming down, hope for interest rates in the future. You did allude to, though, a couple of things that maybe you're not as happy about, maybe some sticky points within the data. Can you talk us through those?
Yeah. So firstly, the good news is that the imported inflation we're getting is becoming deflation.
Yeah.
So that's great. We're not getting any inflation out of China because of their economy being so weak, and we're not getting anywhere near as much inflation out of the rest of the world, which is fantastic because that's 45% of the basket. Okay, that part done. 55 left, and it's a little sticky. Services inflation is still holding. I think it's like 5.8%. That's well away from the sub 3 that we need. And then you think within that, what's happening? Well, insurance premiums up nearly 15% on the year as insurers globally reassessing their risk, given all the natural disasters that seem to be more frequent and more severe. They're pricing that in. That hurts. So if you own a home, you're getting hit by insurance premiums, but you're also paying 10% more on your rates. And that's because councils have underinvested for decades. I was supposed to be in a lockup this morning for the inflation report, had to be cancelled because of water issues with the Stats NZ's building in Wellington. So that was a bit of a laugh in itself. And then, if you don't own your own home, rents are up 5% on the last year.
Yeah.
And that's because of the migration boom. So there are a lot of pain points for households, on top of interest rates that we're having to pay. And they're big chunks of the CPI basket.
The struggle with that is almost what can you do to bring that back, right? Because those insurance premiums going up is a direct result of the risk being priced in their cost. Rates, like you said, they almost have no choice but to go up. The bridge and the viaduct's been stuck like this for 6 months. We've got to go 50 k's over the harbour bridge every time there's a gust of wind. The trains out south get cancelled every day. The underinvestment, it's simply you can't not raise rates at this point. So I just don't understand how they're meant to bring that back over the short or medium term.
No. There's a few things that need to be done. We need to make infrastructure, like its own thing.
Yeah.
And it can't go up and down with the election cycles every 3 years. It needs to be, an Infrastructure New Zealand fund, which is set up and it can fund itself. Let them go. I mean, I keep pointing to New Zealand Super as being a fantastic achievement led by super smart Kiwis who are given the opportunity to invest long term. They're not investing quarter by quarter. They're not investing and showing shareholders their returns and being worried that they lose people. No, they've got until the mid-30s before anyone draws down. And they've done a fantastic job. We need an infrastructure fund set up just like that to handle long-term infrastructure problems. And the councils need to be empowered because at the moment, councils are reluctant to take on stuff because all they see is the cost. They don't see the benefit, right? There needs to be benefit for councils. If you said put road, rail and everything out to this new area, and by the way, you're going to collect the GST off whatever, or you're going to get some sort of gains out of doing it, then the council will be like, done.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I find that really interesting because we talk about it sometimes in terms of the New Zealand superannuation at the moment is it's a problem that no politician is going to fix, and that we think my prediction is that one day it just gets outsourced to, I don't know, the Reserve Bank or someone, and they say fix it, because politically it's suicide to be like, oh, we're going to increase the age or means test it or do something. And I think that to your point around infrastructure not having a 4-year cycle that it has to get a lolly scramble, then they take all the lollies back, and then they take some more lollies because they didn't like what the other party was doing.
They don't execute any of them properly anyway.
No.
And you just look at it and you go, how long do we keep this going for? You know, like before everything just starts crumbling.
Yeah. What are examples? I mean, you're a smart guy, Jarrod, but this isn't an idea you've just come out with off the top of your head.
Oh, the Norwegian
there's countries,
funds.
there's countries in the world that are doing this well. What are the examples?
Well, Aussies, right next to us, they do infrastructure very well. And I mean, they go through booms and busts because of their mining industry. You know, the mining is very much boom bust. But outside of those, when I was there, they were going through a residential construction boom. So basically, they took all the miners who lost their jobs and put them into building houses and apartments and took off.
Yeah,
absolutely took off. And you know, they're not silly. They build the railway, and then what they were doing was in Sydney, the railway stations became apartment blocks.
Yeah.
So on top of the train station, but these massive apartment blocks, and a little city would form along these major train stops. Absolute no-brainer.
Yeah.
And that land is pretty much wasted beforehand.
Yep.
Yeah.
They do it very well. And I always love using the example. Look at their harbour bridge and look at ours. They built theirs before us. It's got loads of lanes. It's got 2 train tracks. It's got a walking track on one side and a bicycle track on the other. And it's massive. And it stood the test of time. Even then, it's not enough, and they've got a tunnel going underneath. You cannot tell me that Sydney Harbour is harder than ours. Yeah. You look at ours, you know, we outgrew it in like 5 years and had put clip-ons on, and we've done nothing since.
I want to come back to like Mike's point around, so these are great ideas, but what happens if these ideas don't get executed right? Long-term inflation, councils are a mess. I can't see any scenario unless there's really big changes like you talk about, that rates just don't keep going up. And then insurance companies, it feels like with natural disasters happening more and more often, those premiums have further risk. How do you price the basket of goods to go, like if you've got a couple of outliers that are skewing the 1 to 3% number, does the whole concept need to change? How do you deal with it if the core problem doesn't get fixed?
Yeah, you've kind of got to look through it. So we love getting rid of numbers we don't like in economics. I can't believe I said that out loud.
We do it monthly in our financial reviews.
But you can actually just look at it and go, well, why don't we take out, insurance premiums and just see how the rest of it's performing? And when you do that, obviously inflation's much lower. It's below 3% already, right? But inflation is inflation. The Reserve Bank targets the headline, which is everything.
Yeah.
So from their point of view, we kind of need all things to settle. But to your point, I can't see council rates cooling off. I can't see insurance premiums cooling off. Not when I talk to insurers and they're telling us that there are at least 20,000 homes at risk of flooding. And that number's increasing every event that we have. So these high risk houses, I really feel for them because there's so many, 20,000, and that's, I think, a very low number. These people's rates are going to go through the roof. Some of them are up 30% already. And then there's going to come a time, which I worry about, where they will have to have an exclusion, and the insurer will say, we'll insure you for everything you don't need except for flood.
Yeah.
And you're like, okay. And then what does the bank do? And then some houses just won't get insurance. Sorry, you're uninsurable.
Yeah.
And again, what does the bank do? I don't think we can put a mortgage on a house like that. So this is where, people need to be compensated, and we need to, what do you call it, managed retreat or whatever it is.
Yeah. Coming back to that conversation about building houses on cliff tops and, who's responsible for the cost of that. governments have jumped in the past where people haven't had the right insurance? What are the implications there?
Well, but then you get a moral hazard, right? Where why would you self-insure if you know that the government's going to step in?
Very much.
Step in.
Yeah. The other one, which we haven't spoken about at all in terms of inflation, that's going to be, unless you fix the core problem, it's going to be a constant problem going forward, is the healthcare system, right? The healthcare system is getting...
It's going to get worse.
Yeah, it's getting worse and worse because there's not the right infrastructure, investment, very attractive for nurses, in particular, to move overseas. Hard to get doctors to stay here. The waiting times are blowing out, which is meaning for personal insurances, income protection, health and medical insurance, they're all increasing. And apart from, the reserve banks, what they did with having interest rates low for too long and the impact there's core issues outside of all of this, which you go, a lot of this is not getting fixed. And part of me is going like, are we just going to have like reasonably high inflation for long periods of time to come? Are you going to have high inflation because of these core problems we're not fixing and no economic growth, which is a horrible combination?
Yeah. What worries me is that if we'd sat down 10 years ago, we would have covered these same points. We knew that we've known that we're going to have an aging population for decades, right? We just look at Japan; they're ahead of everyone else. Look at Italy, all these other countries. They are pretty much showing us what happens when you have a really, really aging population, and we're headed that way. Not so bad as other countries because we import people. So we do have this aging demographics where there's more and more people over the age of 65. But we import people in the 20 to 40 year age bracket. So we are kind of filling that gap, which didn't happen in Japan. But we would have all sat down 10 years ago and said, yes, health is going to be a massive cost. So is paying for people's retirements. All these things we've known about for a long, long time. Yeah. What worries me is that when we sit down in 10 years' time, and we're going through the same stuff.
Yeah. I think the government brought in quite a piece of legislation that should fix that though, which is they're bringing back cigarettes, which basically, means that, hey, don't worry about it. As soon as you get to the end of your economic life, you're out of here.
Yeah. Nice.
Sorry. It's true. Yeah. It is actually true. Everyone's you think about it, people die from cigarettes at age 65 plus, which is basically right when they start drawing on the health system and the superannuation system. So
there you go, conspiracy theorists. The government is killing you.
So James, before we continue, I have got a special announcement.
Have you started sticking to your budget?
Absolutely not.
You finally made it as an after hours DJ.
I wish. Mate, the thing is, we have got a brand new podcast partner, Partners Life.
You mean the award-winning insurance provider with over 300,000 Kiwis insured?
Yep, they're also a New Zealand-operated company and they are passionate about increasing financial literacy amongst Kiwis.
Sounds like a great match. Where can I learn more about them?
Check out their website in our show notes below.
Really thought DJ Magic Mike was going to be a global sensation for a second. Jarrod, that's all. I do agree that there is the concern that we will have the same issues we're talking about in the future. But the great saying, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is today.
Yes.
Are we hearing the right conversations happening at the right level? There seems to be some pretty switched on people in this new government trying to do some good things. Are you hearing any of the idea of outsourcing infrastructure to make it independent, dealing with any of these core problems, or we're not hearing that yet?
I think we are. I think the government sort of came in with very high expectations, very, very high expectations from people who voted them in there, and yet to deliver. But I am hearing the right noises for sure on all these issues. They're not leaving, I think, any stone unturned. So you're definitely hearing the right thing. For me, it's just about execution. It is so hard, no matter what side of government you're on, to execute. And that's what matters, right? We can talk, but unless something actually gets done. But I am definitely, I guess, somewhat optimistic that stuff will get done.
Yeah, because the other thing I'm concerned about, which is probably less of an economics piece and more of a humanity and people is these are really chunky problems that do not get fixed overnight. And do we have the ability to, if there is a good plan, well explained, will we give the people enough time to implement the plan without trying to reshuffle all the decks?
Not in 3 years, unfortunately. So that really is why we need, a group of really smart individuals. New Zealand's full of smart individuals, right? It's not hard. Get them together, get them in a room, and say, right, this is the entity. This is NZ whatever fund, infrastructure fund. We'll tip in this money. You'll be able to go out and source money directly, which will be easy for them to do, particularly when you can say, I'm going to build a road and put a toll on the end of it. Easy. They'll get their funding, and then away they go. So long as they don't have to report to each government that comes in along the way. And you can say, you're in this job for 10, 15, 20 years, and away you go. And the best example, which I like telling people, was I had a really lovely young guy come and build a fence for me. And he turned up with this old tractor that just literally bangs into the ground. Then I saw him a couple of weeks later, and he had a brand new tractor, which was like 5 times the size. And I'm like, man, you're leveraging up. And he goes, I've just got a 5-year contract with the council to do fences along the motorway.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. And he said, 5 years, I'm now going out and hiring two people.
Yeah.
I'm like, right. So he had 5 years, right? And in that time, you leverage up. He had certainty of revenue for 5 years.
Yeah.
It's the same thing with infrastructure investment all over the place. We can leverage up, but it's really difficult when you build a motorway from here, up to Wellsford and then stop. And then you lose the machine.
Yeah.
You lose all the workers, whereas it should have just gone all the way to Kaitaia.
Yeah, we should just keep the thing going.
Just keep going.
Yeah. On that investing into New Zealand piece and making it attractive, how is New Zealand looked at on the world stage in terms of, say we get our house in order, right? And we're like, we want investment, we're open for business. Is New Zealand seen the same way? Do you think we will get that external investment, or do they look at us and maybe go, these guys have chopped and changed, they closed down for a period of time, maybe we're not as attractive?
Yeah, change for us is actually quite narrow.
Yeah.
Going from a national to a Labor government on the global scheme of things is not a big deal, particularly if you want to compare to the US at the moment. Our changes aren't massive. Businesses and investors look at New Zealand as being, relatively transparent, relatively safe. You're not going to get ripped off. You're not going to get there are courts,
no corruption or bribery,
all of that sort of stuff. We do rank quite highly, and I think it's reflected in the business that we do offshore, and I think ultimately it shows up in our migration stats.
It's funny.
Why are we getting so many people coming here if we're such a bad country?
Yeah,
we're not.
Yeah, it's funny you bring that up because I've had a couple of customers recently living in Asia coming back to New Zealand for a few months. A few people going on holidays around the world and going, I love New Zealand. And Auckland in particular just gets bashed about the infrastructure, the city, the crime, dangerous, all those kind of things. And the way a lot of people, because if you haven't gone anywhere, you maybe get a little bit down on the place. But I've talked to a few people recently and they go, it's a great place to be.
It's funny you say that. I don't know if we bought a billboard in the UAE or something, but I've had like 4 customers in the last 2 weeks from the UAE buying places back in New Zealand.
Yeah.
Effectively just saying like, we're going to come back. Let's get something now. And we might be 12 months, 18 months away from returning back to NZ. Yeah.
Kiwis working there.
Yep.
Coming back.
Yeah. And from Dubai, Saudi, a few different places, and a real mixture of industries as well. Right. Which that was the bit that I found quite fascinating. Industries that you could very much go, well, we could park up in San Fran for a couple of years, or do something else, and they're like, nah, we're coming home.
Yeah, I do find when I talk to some of those people, they've got quite niche roles and they're getting paid really well overseas.
Really well.
They won't be clocking the same.
Yeah, so going, I'm going to take a huge pay cut, or actually, my role doesn't exist here at all. And a lot of them have 3 3 or 4 year old kids, and they go, we want to do school for our kids here, but taking huge pay cuts or going, I actually don't know what role I'm going to return to. And we need to, I don't know what the answer is for those people, but I've certainly talked to a lot of smart people on the other side who've left recently and moved to Australia in particular. We need to be attractive to those people.
No, it's a fair call out. I've got my very close friend, known him since primary school. He lives in London, but he's got a deal with his employer that he can spend between 3 to 6 months in New Zealand every year. And they were like, with Teams and Zoom and all the way, they're like, that's not a problem at all. Go for it. So there's a bit of hybrid working happening as well. And I think there are people who can actually physically do their job from here now, rather than having to be in New York, having to be. So it makes that move a bit easier.
I do still worry a bit about the shift to Australia though. Like I was seeing some friends on Sunday, and they've got 2 kids. Both of them are working. They live in Tauranga, and they were just like, we're out. We're done.
Had enough.
They're just like, why are we hanging on to this mortgage to live in Tauranga on a house that for the same price, they're moving just north of Brisbane. Effectively, they get a house twice the size with a pool, some sunny weather. And again, the similar grumblings around income, cost, infrastructure, weather. And they were like, nah, we're done. We're up in sticks.
I had a similar story. I had and I definitely know they'll be watching this episode. Some clients where he earns about 150 grand, but the company's been based in Australia as well. He's been offered $300K a year to move across, and then his wife is a nurse, and obviously she's going to get a bump as well. And you look, even if you don't go forever, right? You spend 5 years over there. You think about how it accelerates your plan, and you go like, how the hell
both
do you
of them
compete
have
with
probably
that?
doubled their incomes.
Yeah.
Jarrod, I want to jump back to the inflation numbers. So we've spoken about what's happened. Let's talk about the rest of the year and maybe going into next year in a bit more detail. So can you talk us through? So we're forecasting that OCR cut in November. Where are you seeing the next? So inflation's at 3.3. Where are you seeing the next inflation number landing at the moment? And what is the next, let's say 18 months, by the end of next year, where get that crystal ball out for us?
Well, I think that's the key question. I think this is the key point. When does inflation fall back into the band? And when we made our call, quite a while ago, saying that the Reserve Bank's going to cut in November, we did exactly this. We went, well, what's our forecast for inflation, and when does it get below 3%? Well, it gets below 3% in this September quarter, and we get that data in October, so they will have that data going into their November decision. So that's how we came up with our November call. It's like, okay, well, this is our inflation forecast. When does it hit 2%? Later in 2025. It's like, okay, so if the Reserve Bank's seen it go from 7.3 to say 2.8 in the quarter that we're in now, that's our current forecast, and then 2.5, 2.3, 2.2, and 2%. Well, they need to get moving as soon as they see it break below 3, because the reason why they've got to get moving is when you set monetary policy today, the greatest impact on the economy is in 18 months' time. So you're actually looking at the end of 2025 right now, and we're saying inflation's at 2 by then. If you remain restrictive, if you keep the brakes on for too long, you're going to actually undershoot. You're going to see inflation head down towards 0, and you're over-scorching parts of the economy because some parts, insurance and whatever, are doing the wrong things. But in order to get everything down, it's a scorched earth policy, really.
Yeah.
And we're saying too much for too long, enough is enough, next move's a cut. Bring it on.
Yeah. And is there anything you think that could buck the current trend that we're on? Any outliers that might go, oh, actually, we've seen the shoot back up, or no, we're gonna have to push the forecast out a bit?
It's funny, since we've last had the chat, more and more things have pointed in the direction of inflation easing.
Yep.
So most of those things that, maybe we were worried about 3 months ago when we last had a chat, business confidence, all these things have dropped so far, their pricing intentions have all moved lower. So it actually looks like it's becoming, more self-fulfilling, more of a snowball to the downside.
Yeah.
But of course, there could be, petrol prices could spike on the back of something going on overseas. We could have a drought. There could be all sorts of stuff that could cause.
I'd be very surprised if we had a drought in this country.
I know
what you mean.
Not with the rain outside.
Yeah. As it pours down for the third day in a row.
But you know what I mean. Like, there could be things that push prices the wrong way for sure.
Yeah. And the Reserve Bank doesn't have any interest in, like, they're just focused on inflation, right? They have no interest in like GDP growth or the lack of growth.
Oh, no, they look at everything.
Yeah. But
absolutely look at everything.
Because, I mean, once again, you come back to, okay, there's a few key pieces that are outside of our control that are causing us to stay still at the level at which we are. But the amount of pain, the lack of investment into businesses, the lack of people going out, buying the tractors, getting the guaranteed 5-year contract, hiring the 2 employees, like, you do what? Like, is there the risk that, a couple of years ago, we talked about the Reserve Bank kept interest rates too low for too long.
Yeah.
How concerned are you that we're going to look back in 12, 24 months and go,
we've done it the other way?
Yeah.
I'm not concerned about that at all. That's what we've been saying will and is happening. We are saying that they've gone too far. We are saying that they're going to keep interest rates too high for too long. And we're seeing it now. We changed our call at the end of 2022 because we saw the business data, we saw our transactional data turn south really quickly. And that was just the first round of refixing.
Yeah.
That was people coming out of 2021 at a 2% rate and being slapped with a 5% rate at the end of 22. We saw spending patterns change immediately. And then we said, well, this is going to be pretty awkward over 2023. And now we're sitting here, we've had 18 months of a recession, right? And it looks like that recession is going to continue for this year. So, we have seen the restrictiveness of monetary policy, strangling the economy.
So you're saying you're predicting an OCR cut in November.
Yeah.
But if you were in charge, would you be cutting it at the next announcement?
August.
Okay. And do you have any concern that then triggers inflation starting to move back up? Because obviously there's the risk, right? If you haven't stamped it out completely, then we've done all this hard work, and we've seen that examples in other places, and you kind of have to not start all over again, but there's that risk, right?
Oh, well, there is that risk, but I don't think it's a giant risk. I think things have gone so far to the downside that what we're doing is just trying to stop it from falling further. So what would I do? 25 basis points in August. Is that going to change your life? No. And then I've probably get 2 or 3 in by the end of the year. That makes people a little bit still restrictive, and then it's over 25 where I'd deliver most of the cuts. And by then, I would have been, I'd be 100% certain that inflation's at 2 because I would have seen it.
Yeah. And do you think that if you were to do that if we fast forward an entire cycle to we've cut before the actual inflation figure was within the target band. Yeah. We fast forward an entire cycle of boom, we're back into recession, or we have higher interest rates, and the Reserve Bank says again to the market, we're going to hold these rates high until the inflation has come down between the target band. The economy would react the same way because people would turn around and go, well, actually last time we kind of got there and you kind of did it anyway. So the actual mechanism, because I always sort of think that 50% of what they do is what they say and 50% is what they actually do. Do you think that would kind of eke away a little bit at the what they say part of that because we didn't quite hold it, as firm? Or do you think, Mike, it might a little bit, but the risk is here and now and we need to address this?
Yeah, I think we, tend to overanalyze these things.
Yeah.
I think we really do. So, you rightly pointed out, we were too lenient for too long, and I remember the discussion there. We all were at it at the time. They were telling us that they wanted to take rates into negative territory. We were fiercely against it. It was a debate, and it went on for too long. Now over the last year and a half, we've all been arguing different angles around how long they should be on hold for and restrictive for. I think what we tend to look back is what actually happened rather than the discussions so much. And I think, we're going to look at it and go, well, interest rates peaked 22. They held them for quite an unusually long period of time. And that ended up, that last 6 months to a year of holding it too long, I think snowballed the pain. I've noticed quite a difference in talking to people today versus 6 months ago versus 18 months ago.
I agree.
It's snowballing to the downside, and that is just simply holding rates restrictive for too long.
Yeah.
And it's snowballing.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're seeing the same things with our customers. Even though the rates haven't really changed, and some of the rates have actually come down a bit, the pain is getting worse. Yep.
Yes.
Yeah, and as Mike can talk about till the cows come home, when we do drop the OCR and interest rates start to move down, it's not like everybody feels more bullish tomorrow, right? Because everybody's got these fixed mortgages.
Yeah, we feel bullish.
Yeah.
Because we sit there and watch these things with a microscope.
Yeah.
But your average punter who, fixed on a year and still has a year to go, what does that mean for them? 2/10 of nothing. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't even think about it until that rate is refixed, right?
Yeah. Okay, to wrap this up though, so we're going to do a second episode with Jarrod where we're going to talk about the trends that he's seeing at the moment. We're feeling good though, right? So it's darkest before the dawn. Is that the theme at the moment?
Yeah, I think so. The data really has turned south in the last couple of months, and we finally found ourselves in a position where everyone's saying the same thing. Rates need to be cut by the end of the year. That's good news for people listening to this, but also businesses out there who have done it tough.
I love it how we get excited because it's so miserable. Hey guys, the world sucks so much here. We're all so miserable.
Yeah.
It's great news because that means it's going to get better.
Yeah.
But that's pretty much at its simplest point. That's what it is, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yep. Okay, so in the next episode, Jarrod's going to join us again, and we're going to go through some themes we're seeing in New Zealand. So the only way to find out about that is if you subscribe to the podcast, give us a like, give us a review so you can catch the next one, and we will see you next time.
Cheers.